others, and that's most commonly what we see as a result of drug and alcohol use.
Thank you. Taylor will come up and ask the next questions.
My questions are for Dr. Azra. What are the dangers of young people using drugs or alcohol, and does it have harmful effects on their body? What are the harmful dangers of young people using drugs or alcohol, and does it have harmful effects on their body?
Harmful effects of drugs and alcohol, is that what I'm hearing? Okay, all right. Well, it depends on the drug, of course. There are the direct problems from the drugs, with not the least being overdose, as you've seen, the risk with opioids of overdose or so. And with alcohol, specifically liver disease and other organs and such, that can be damaged with methamphetamine stimulants that can affect the heart badly and do many other things along those lines. But the biggest risk of any of the drugs we're talking about is the risk of addiction, where beyond the physical effects, the drive to use the drug causes trouble in your life, where it causes you to not do the things you need to do for school, home, or work, and to your life to be dominated by the drive to use the drug. So the addiction itself causes major problems, leads people to criminal activity, and leads people to whatever, drop out of school or not get the education they would need. So the addiction itself is the common thread for what we're doing here. But of course there are direct harms and physical harms from it, and mental health problems too, all depending on which drug we're talking about.
When does somebody's dependence on a substance become an addiction, and can they just use less instead of quitting?
Okay, so we're talking about the difference between dependence and addiction, right? Okay, so this morning before I came here, I had a cup of coffee. Not as big a cup as what they has down there, but a cup. And I tend to do that every morning. I enjoy it. I like having my cup of coffee, but I don't find through the years that I need more and more coffee. I don't find that I'm spending more and more money to get it. I don't find that I'm spending my day thinking about how to get the coffee. And I don't find that I am neglecting work or family or otherwise giving up activities so I can get and use and drink my coffee. However, if I did not have that cup of coffee this morning, by this evening I would have a headache and I would be quite a grouch. That is physical dependence, and it is a property of the drug caffeine. That is universal. Anybody who consumes one of the drugs that cause physical dependence will, to some degree or other, have withdrawal or physical dependence. When you stop the drug, you will have some symptoms. That's the nature of the drug or so, not of the person. That is inevitable with that. However, you get over that. Addiction is the compulsive drive to use a drug despite the fact that it's hurting you, the things I talked about. If the drug is causing that kind of problems in your life, that is an addiction, okay? That does not happen to everybody who is exposed to the drug. Regular use of drug is what can lead to it, but it does vary. The single biggest risk for developing an addiction is a family history. It has been a history of people in your close family of having alcohol or drug problems, including tobacco. Anyone uses that, so if you have that in your family, you're more at risk. Also, you should know that the alteration of the chronic disease of addiction, chronic disease meaning it's long-lasting, maybe lifelong for that, has to do with the pathways in the brain that have to do with learning. Your brain is better than my brain at learning. Now, if you picture, say, a Play-Doh, your brain is more like Play-Doh that just came out of the container, and you can mold it in whatever shape you need. My old brain is more like Play-Doh that's been sitting around for a week, and it's dried and hard, and it's hard to get it to be any shape. So it's harder for me to learn a new skill, whether it's texting with my thumbs or a video game or a foreign language or a sport, than it is for you to learn that, because your brain learns more easily. But you got to hardwire that in, and you do. And addiction is an alteration of the parts of the brain that have to do with learning and reward. And when that happens, it's not going away. At least not for a long, long time or so. So your young brain, since it can learn more easily, is more prone towards addiction than an older brain is. And we know that the age of first use of any drug or alcohol correlates a lot with the chance of developing addiction and how severe that addiction will be.
Thank you. Now, Courtney.
My first question is for Lieutenant Parker. What are some of the common calls that you get in Kittitas?
So this is a relatively small community, and this community has been used to and functioned by policing themselves, if you will. So not everyone calls 911 when there's a problem. So a lot of our calls are more mundane: cold burglaries, cold car prowls, a lot of animal complaints, a lot of code enforcement complaints, traffic complaints. I want to go back to the community's used to policing themselves leads into a problem when you have an overdose or somebody that's severely intoxicated. A lot of times what you'll see is everybody's scared and they evacuate the area and they just leave that person there. And if you have a community that's not used to calling 911 or used to using resources like emergency medical technicians or police, I hate to come to an overdose where the body's just laying there and everybody's left. Like, that is such a problem that I've seen in my career in the last 10 years probably. Stay with the person and call 911 and give aid. Like the video said, we're not going to prosecute you for helping somebody. We're not going to launch a major investigation unless that person actually dies. Other than that, it's just we need to make sure they're safe, secure, and make sure everybody there is safe, and then get them to the hospital. So we don't see a lot of those here in this small community, but I just wanted to make a point that if you have an emergency, call 911. Don't be it's a nice little community, and you guys are very capable of policing yourselves, but in situations where they need to call 911, let's just do that.
How has the recent change in laws around possession affect what you do or how you respond to calls where illegal substances are involved?
There's so many different ways I can answer that. You probably heard in the introduction that I work narcotics on a drug task force, and that's pretty much a way of the past in these Washington and Oregon specifically. I'd say the biggest effect is that I'm starting to see a lot more drug use and a lot more overdose in younger people, because if there's no consequence, then it seems like it's okay to do it now. That's a trend I'd like to see go away. They've kind of decriminalized drugs in this state. It doesn't mean that they're absolutely legal, and it doesn't mean that you should just partake and party all the time just because you might not go to jail. The biggest difference I've seen, besides being able to actually prosecute and take people to jail for certain things, the biggest difference I've seen is it's been an invitation for everybody to just go wild, and it's creating a lot of family problems, overdoses, death.
Do you see many parties where there are underage people drinking? And if so, do you see most of them at the party or driving home?
Specifically with the town of Kittitas, most of it's older adults drinking and driving. I don't have the numbers for the whole county, but for the most part, I'll just make this point: if you're drinking or in an environment where you're drinking, have somebody that can drive or somebody that can come and get you, because driving is unnecessary. It's irresponsible, I think. I just don't think there's a need to drive. As far as MIP parties, I'm sure there's some out in the county, but I don't hear of them very often. In this town, rarely happens.
Now back to Gabe.
Before they pass on, let me just echo a bit of that, because when you ask about physical harm, I should have mentioned risky behavior, and the main one that we talk about would be driving and such. So that is certainly a consequence of that. So please, I know we're talking maybe future alcohol use it's common and even normal in our society, but please think about transportation and never be driving or get in a vehicle with someone who drives. your age, that is a major risk of death.
Next is Nate Edwards. Nate, can you briefly tell us about your story and how you started using substances?
Yeah, so it's funny, Dr. Azrael brought up being, like, having family that uses, and me personally, I was born on 12 different drugs, so right off the bat, I was predisposed, and then, you know, I spent my first 2 years of my life in a treatment center with my mom, and then at 16, when I was in middle school, my older brother brought opiates back into the house after my mom's been clean all those years, and it became a family thing. So I didn't necessarily start using drugs at school with friends. It was right at home where I thought it was completely safe and normal, and then it got worse. So that's how it started.
How did you know it was time to stop using?
Well, there's a long list of reasons, but a couple of them would have to be police involvement, definitely. Started getting in trouble with the law, got kicked out of school. My mom was like, I would go disappearing for weeks. My mom would call the cops looking for me. And I also noticed on a social level that I started not to see eye to eye with my friends. You know, people I hung out with every day. Things really started to change. And then, as it all escalated and we all got worse into our addictions, I started losing friends. And that is actually the initial reason I'm clean at this moment right now, is because my best friend, his name was Jordan Hampson, he died in a car wreck, and substances like heroin and meth, like, that's what caused it, you know? It had everything to do with it. So after losing my best friend, I did what I had to do to get clean. I got on drug court. I started going to NA meetings, moved into an Oxford house, and surrounded myself around people that wanted to heal, you know, wanted to change their lives for the better, didn't want to just throw it away.
How hard do you think it is for someone to get back on track after returning to use?
Well, everyone's different, you know. We're all clearly at different spots, you know, with our lives, emotionally, mentally, you know. And I think it just depends on that person, like what do they want to do, how bad has it affected them. Because I tell you what, it's possible, it's definitely possible, but it's very hard to do without support. And thankfully, in our community, there's multiple resources to help, you know. And I know some people, you know, that are like, oh, I don't like police, or, you know, I don't want anyone that's gonna get me in trouble, but it's not like that, you know. There's people just like me you can go talk to, you know. Like I said, there's a lot of resources, you know, and it's not always super serious, you know. Of course, it's a life and death situation, but I'm saying, like, when you're asking for help or looking for information, like, you're not gonna get in trouble, you know. And there's a lot of ways people will be willing to help you, you know. So, like I said, depending on the person, depending on your support, it can be very easy, you know. And like, I'll end with this, and I wouldn't be where I'm at today without my friends. You know, my friends right now are the ones that keep me focused, but for them to keep me focused, they have to be clean or at least going the general same direction I am, you know? So keep your friends close, you know? And also, if you see a friend that's struggling, you know, help them. And if you don't know how, ask, you know, ask for ways to help them. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Courtney?
Now for Beatty. Beatty, if you could please tell us your story.
Well, I could sit here all morning long and talk to you guys about my brother Mateo, but I can't tell you guys about who Mateo was without telling you guys that are sitting here today how precious your life is. My brother looked just like you. He was so beautiful, just like you. And I really wish that he was sitting here listening to this group of people. I don't know you, and I don't know what your story is, but what I can tell you guys is that you have such a beautiful purpose in this life. And no matter what you're going through right now, maybe you're already involved with drugs. Maybe you're already struggling. Well, it's not too late for you. It was late for my brother because he's not here anymore and he was only 16. But you are still alive. So I think the one thing that I just want to tell you guys is just say something if you're struggling. Please just ask for help. Even if it's super embarrassing or you're just scared, just ask for help. Because maybe you don't feel like there's somebody that loves you enough to help you, but trust me, there is. More than anything, I wish that I could just have this conversation right now that I'm having with you with my brother. I mean, he went through a lot, and I believe the reason he started using was because he felt the need to fit in. He thought that maybe if he started using what his friends were using, maybe he would not be bullied as much anymore. And I can tell you that the life of the family is never the same. It's never the same. I mean, it's been almost 2 years, and I still feel like it was just yesterday that my parents found my brother lying on his bed, when just the night before they had talked to him. And just that day before, I had made plans with my brother. I understand that having people that you don't know might not do anything to you, but we're all sitting here because we care so much about you, and the drugs that are available today to you, it just takes one pill. It just takes one time. It just one time. You don't even have to be addicted. Because in my brother's case, it took one night of trusting the wrong person, and that ended his life. That ended his dreams. That ended who he wanted to be. That ended all of the memories that we had. And now, the only thing that's left is for us to sit here and talk about his memory. And all I have now are just pictures of him. go through my life and go through my phone, just looking at videos, trying not to forget his laugh, trying not to forget the last conversation we had. And so I hope that by us being here today, it has hopefully painted a picture of reality. My brother overdosed on fentanyl. He thought he was buying a Percocet pill, but it was fentanyl. And it was 10 micrograms that killed him. That's not even visible to your eye. So I just really hope that, you know, something touched your heart today. And I hope that, you know, even if it's just one person today that needed to hear this, I just hope that you reach out and you know that your life is so precious and you're so loved. And thank you for listening. Thank you, Dee. Okay.
Obviously, you guys know me. I know most of you know my story. My son Sage passed away August 7th of 2021, and of a fentanyl overdose. And fortunately or unfortunately, that's how Biddy and I know each other. Because the person that sold it to them is in court and will be sentenced in March. So that's how we became friends. Everything she said, I hope rings true with you. It takes very little. You know, Sage died of a Percocet that he thought he bought that was laced with fentanyl from the same person. But he was 21 and a college student, and by the age of 21, he'd been in rehab 3 times. And he had arranged to go back. 2 days after he died, because he knew he was struggling. So, you know, always ask for help from any of us. You know, your teachers are here for you. And I know a lot of you have a close bond with many of us. So always reach out to one of us if you're struggling. Okay? We're here for you. Because it's the worst thing that could happen to a parent. So, thank you.
We would now like to have you guys ask them questions if you'd like.
So with the resources, there's a place called KCRCO, and they're actually right over here, you know, and they're super helpful. You know, they're actually the people to ask more about specifically the resources, and you know, to the question of where these pills are coming from, honestly, anywhere, everywhere. And it's not so much as like where they came from, it's where they're at. You know? It's the fact that they're here in our community, you know, and like they said, it's very, 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 very dangerous, you know? And it's crazy. You don't even necessarily have to smoke one of these pills. You can just touch one and you could overdose, you know? So there's a whole new level of just danger when it comes to it. So, yeah.
Just to add to that, Pam was handing out this microphone. She was involved with compiling a resource list, which I'm sure you could get for folks that list all the various resources around the community. Try to work with that. That's a lot of her project, which we really appreciate.
We're waiting for other questions. You know, you hear the stories, and you know these are people in your community. These are people that would be in your school today if things were different. And I've been doing this for 37 years, and I can't have that conversation with anybody's parents anymore. So.
You said lean, right? Absolutely, that's a drug. That's actually a combination of two drugs, and it's just as bad as heroin because it is opiate, and really, it's just as addictive as any other drug you can think of. So, yeah. Yeah, go ahead, bro. Okay, my bad, bro. It's kind of hard to hear you. You said what happens if you're caught by the police?
So, illegal substances or any addicting substances at your age is going to be illegal. Under 18, you can't use it, you can't consume it, you can't possess it. So there's going to be a report drafted in your name. It's going to be sent to the prosecutor's office, and they can decide or determine what to do with that. After 18, it depends on what you're doing while you're using or consuming that drug. A lot of these addictive behaviors, like the doctors explained, lead to other things like theft, like burglary, like assault, or homicide in the case of their two stories. Whoever gave the drugs to the people who died just committed homicide. So there are legal consequences. Under 18, you can't even touch it. There will be a legal consequence for that.
Let me address that also a moment. We know addiction is a disease, and disease has characteristics, including behaviors that can get you in real trouble. However, that doesn't make those behaviors legal. So those behaviors still can get you in real difficulty. But here, locally, we're trying very hard to get people who have even consequences of their disease to get it treated rather than getting jail time or whatever. So there's lots of resources, including a drug court here, and the jail's making a real effort. Everyone's making a real effort to try to get things moved towards treatment rather than towards punishment.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that again. So it's our job to bring the lawbreaker or the crime to the court system, and at the court system is where these resources will come in. So just because you're contacted by the police or arrested or charged doesn't mean that you're going to see a consequence of jail time or imprisonment at the end, because the focus is going to be on safety for your situation. What's the best thing for your individual situation? And and that's the court's job to get those resources. So I don't want you to be afraid of police when you're contacted in these situations. We're still here to help, but it's our job to bring that to the light of the courtroom.
You know, and oh, actually, go ahead. Can you speak up, bro? So, wait, so like, if a drug's prescribed to you, it shouldn't be laced at all, you know? You know, it's really, man, it's super hard to hear you, but yeah, you want to come?
So the chances of your prescription being laced with something is next to zero, and that would be a medical issue. Other than that, if you're prescribed medication, make sure that you are the one that's handling them, or in your case, your parent or something, that it's not just accessible to anybody to tamper with, or it's not accessible for anybody to mess with. To answer your direct question though, if it happened to accidentally be laced with something from the pharmacy, that would be almost zero chance, and it would be a medical issue.
However, if you buy something that's not through prescriptions prescribed for you on the street, you can't really know what you're getting. If I could spend a few moments, I heard fentanyl mentioned, talking some about that, and I think that's what these guys deal with. But fentanyl is an extremely potent opioid, and what we mean by potent is that it takes a much smaller amount to get the same effect that it takes a larger amount of other drugs. Now that doesn't sound so bad if you just take less of it, but it's so potent if you think about what that means. When we dose fentanyl in the hospital, we're typically looking at 50 to 100 micrograms. You all know what a microgram is compared to a milligram? 1,000 micrograms to 1 milligram. Okay? So we're all used to English measures, so put that in perspective. An extra strength Tylenol that you buy is 500 milligrams, okay? So to divide that into 1 milligram, you have to divide it equally into 500 piles. To divide it into 100 micrograms, you're gonna have to divide each of those 10 more times, so to 5,000 piles. And to get down to 50, which would be a beginning dose, you're gonna be at 10,000 piles. Now, can you all, even in your nice controlled science lab here, take a 500 milligram Tylenol and divide it into 5 or 10,000 equal piles and have the same amount of drug in it? Well, believe me, the folks that are selling these drugs or getting their drugs from, from cartels, whatever, they're not able to either. So you don't know what's going to be in that. First of all, they're not even advertising fentanyl. They'll be advertising something else. So no idea what's even supposed to be in it. And we don't know how much will be in it. So that sets the stage where you can get less or a lot more. And that's why we see so many overdoses with fentanyl, is people can't know what they're getting. They may get twice what they usually do, they may just don't know. It's so easy to overdose on it.
So yeah, just to follow up on the opioid overdoses, and obviously you guys saw the video, and the availability of naloxone, publicly with responders, has absolutely made a significant improvement in outcomes for a number of people. One of the effects of opioids, particularly if you're overdosed, is that your respiratory drive goes away. So your body doesn't have the drive to breathe. And so one of the questions that didn't get asked is, hey, what are people going to look like? People that are breathing slower than they should, less than 10 times a minute, they're at significant risk. And so engaging those people, keeping them conscious and reminding them to breathe if there is naloxone available. But I also, sort of want to caution you, naloxone reverses the overdose for about 20 minutes. typically, particularly if fentanyl's involved, the half-life or the length of that overdose for fentanyl typically lasts in the hours. So it is entirely possible that you can be dosed with naloxone or Narcan and recover and regain that respiratory drive and such, and 20 to 30 minutes later, as the naloxone wears off, the drug kicks back in, and you're right back where you were to begin with. And so just be extremely careful. This is a temporary fix, and we need to still follow up with medical care.
Contact your congressman and legislatures on that. We tried to fight some of those decisions and we lost.
And, another factor is some people get into situations where they get injured, right? Like, they break their leg, break their arm, and they get pain medication. And they abuse it. They give it to their friends, people that are not prescribed it, people it's not for. And honestly, it's like, it's crazy. I don't know why the U.S. allows it. I don't get it. But I know that at the end of the day, it's a choice. Like, people make the choice to do what they do, so there's that one.
Let me also mention that the people that manufacture drugs are very creative. There are a lot that happens. And when you outlaw a drug, when you make it illegal, of course, that doesn't mean you can't even get it, but it gets harder if it's illegal. You outlaw a specific drug. They make a drug derivative of that or close to it. It hasn't been out there to be outlawed, so it can get in. And you look at that particularly like some things that may be legal, like synthetic marijuana, or as you get these things that they are different than what we've outlawed, we call them bath salts, say it's not even for medical use, and then they can be sold. So they can legally sell things that are problems, but have not at least yet been outlawed in a lot of places.
I'll get to questions. I'm going to piggyback one more time. Part of the problem with enforcing on fentanyl, the way we were trained is less than a grain of salt, less than 1 grain, individual grain of salt is enough to overdose if you don't have a tolerance. So that could be considered 1 or 2 doses depending on the person. So a grain of salt is enough to overdose on. Now, I could fill a little pill bottle of that and smuggle it anywhere I want, and I've got a couple $100,000 worth of fentanyl in my pocket. So it's going to be almost impossible to outlaw that probably.
So you guys touched on this a little, but I want to make sure some of the kids get it. I've had talks with kids, and they assure me they're doing a safe drug. Could you maybe talk about the fact that even a safe, good drug could be laced with something and you have no idea?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Okay. What's a safe drug? Yeah, that's actually a really scary term because nothing about drugs is safe. Like anything can happen. Like normal stuff like y'all do. Play video games, driving, hanging out with your friends. If you add drugs, safe drugs, to any one of those circumstances, your life is in danger, potentially. And I know some people think weed is a safe drug. Well, I got some news. Weed nowadays is actually being laced with fentanyl more often than not. If you get it off the streets, it has a very high potential of being laced. So.
if someone gives if a person gives something to another person and they misrepresent what it is and that person dies, it's homicide. So if you lace it and give it to them and they didn't know it's laced, you just committed a homicide. If you actually supply them with enough drugs that kills them in a dose, you committed homicide. So there's a huge consequence for somebody dying when you give them drugs.
Let me just mention, we talk about safe drugs, and sometimes people have the impression if it's legal, it must be safe. And just say that the two drugs in this world called the most death and destruction in this world are tobacco and alcohol, which of course are legal in many places. And you very often see another drug come up and be legal. Just as you can buy it legally, please don't assume that's safe. That's certainly not the case for any of the drugs we see.
Can't hear you, man.
I think your question was, is it easy to track down the person that sold the pill to the person? One comment I just want to add about my brother is there was one specific conversation that I remember he had with my mom. My parents had found some weed in his room, and my brother laughed when my parents found the weed, and he said that it's just weed. Weed doesn't do anything to you. But in my brother's specific case, weed led to other drugs. It led him to Percocet pills. It led him to get addicted to other drugs. So no drug is safe, no matter what anybody tells you. Is it easy to find the person that sold the drug? In many cases, yes, it is. For the person that sold my brother and Sage a drug, he's a young person, and I just want to put it in perspective. His life is now in a very difficult situation, right? He's facing many, many years in prison, in federal prison. He took the lives of 2 people, and he no longer gets to live his free life next to his children that he has. He doesn't get to live next to his wife. He doesn't get to enjoy the freedom that this country gives us. And so, while it is very heartbreaking that there are 2 lives involved in this case, there is another life of a person who honestly could have had a future had he made the right decision not to sell, not to distribute deadly drugs. So both cases, on both sides of this case, it's tragic for both families, for all families involved. So it can be hard as well, so you just never know.
In our cases, to add to that, Gage, social media played a huge role in that. They were able to, because I knew the passcode to Sage's phone, they were able to get into it and look at saved conversations. And that's how it came down with ours personally. And I want to say kid, he just turned 21 he's in Yakima Federal Jail. He was a friend of Sage's over the years. I met him when we first moved here. He was 10 years old at the skate park. And I hadn't seen him in years, but they've been friends over the years. So it was somebody he knew, and he knew well, that sold him the Percocet laced with fentanyl. So it can be very challenging to find somebody who sold it. In our cases, social media played a big role. So I guess in lack of better words, we kind of got lucky that happens.
You know, and another thing, and I'm speaking purely from experience. So, you know, when you're a teenager or a young man or a young woman, and you start doing drugs to fit in, you stand out. For real. Like, because everything changes. The people you hang out with change, your behavior, just your whole energy, your aura, the people you hang out with, the activities you do. Like, it's kind of obvious, you know? And I see you. Go ahead.
How do you safely dispose of the drugs?
Most communities, and ours included, at the lobby of the city hall, there's a dispensary box you can put them in and they get incinerated.
There are several places that have those boxes. Community Health Center of Washington has them. The KVH Pharmacy has it. I think you can take things to the sheriff's office. In Cleellum, I know it's the sheriff's office. I'm not sure where on Kittitas they might. But in the county, there's several disposal spots. You don't even.
You also have immunity and anonymity for turning them in. Just walk in and drop them in, there's no questions.
I'd say that with it depends. Of course, not all drugs are drugs of addiction, so it depends. Take a high blood pressure medicine, you're not dealing with it for that, so it varies from drug to drug. But the most addictive, the drug with the most potential to cause addiction being nicotine, actually. But others are, have a lot of strength. So it depends, like I say, on the person's family history, depends on other things, the presence of several mental illnesses, bipolar disorder, so they can be very prone towards them. And like I said, it depends on the age, and then it depends on the drug. So you can't really answer that for any carte blanche. It depends a whole lot on those other issues. But obviously, addiction is a very common problem.
So I hear this, and obviously, we try to make a distinction between medicine and drugs, and but I want you to understand some of the most difficult overdoses we go to, and they're not meant to be overdoses that would necessarily, create a positive effect for somebody, but you can kill yourself with Tylenol and aspirin really effectively. And so, this idea that unless you sort of understand what you're doing, obviously taking medicines according to the dose, according to what your doctor says, and communicating back to your doctor that says, hey, this isn't working the way it normally should work, those kinds of things, that keeps you in bounds, for what I consider to be medicine. But when you're talking about taking things, to create an effect that isn't the intended effect, I know there's rumors out there that taking a bunch of Benadryl creates a high. We're seeing Benadryl overdoses that are fairly significant. So, again, you're talking to, a group of people who, see that backside of what happens. And, it's not everybody. It's not everybody that tries a drug. It's not everybody that uses it a few times. But the more you do it and the more circumstances you do it, you're increasing your risk. And you can't trust everybody around you to have good intentions. And so we're pleading with you to really think about those consequences again, because, like I said, I'm at the end of my career, and one more time I have to talk to parents. I'm done.
So it's a challenging question to answer, but it's 2 waves of narcotics detecting dogs were retired in the last few years. So it was such an expensive overhaul to have to retire 2 waves of dogs that I'm not sure the future of the canine program. I know we can't have bite dogs anymore either, so canine is a resource that we're just not going to have right now. It's going to be very scarce if we do. There was also a movement to pull all the school resource officers out of all the schools across the country a couple of years ago, and now they're trying to reverse that movement and bring them back. So I know here that we're looking into grants to try to have those conversations. I just committed to having more officers in this town in these schools more often throughout the week. I just committed to that yesterday, but as far as resources go for drug detection dogs, I don't even know what the future of that would be in Washington.
And, you know, it's crazy because I was one of those kids when I was in high school. And I regret it clearly. But, you know, years after it happened, it was already going downhill. But when I got kicked out of school, it went really, really downhill. You know? And like, think about just where you guys are at, right? You guys got a bunch of friends. I know class is like, you know, sometimes it's school. I get it. But like, you guys are building a future. You're building memories together that are going to be, that could potentially be stronger than anything. You know, when you think of school, do you think of like your class? No, you think of your friends. You know, so pretty much what I'm trying to get at is hold yourself accountable and hold your friends accountable. You know, and I know some of y'all are like, oh, what do you mean snitch? No, it's not called snitching. It's called saving your friend's life. Surviving so you can go see your parents that night. Or anything along those lines, you know? I know it seems real minor at times because it's just alcohol or it's just weed, but it always gets worse. One thing I know about addiction, I'll get to you in a second, but one thing I know about addiction is you become everything that you hate, period. You know, the things that you don't like, the people that you're talk smack, you know, you're like, oh, why does this dude act this way, or why does he do that? You become that person. You become that person you see on the movies, you know, struggling, all these rappers and stuff, you know, that's true stuff. You know, I know it seems fake, but it's real. And you in the maroon, you got a question? Or whoever. Psychedelics, huh? So, of course, with psychedelics, it's still a drug, right? And it can still mess somebody up mentally bad. Like, I mean bad. I have two friends right now that they took psychedelics once, they took acid, and they are never coming back, like mentally. You know, because like it was mentioned earlier, some of us have like mental health issues like depression, you know, my older brother, he has drug-induced schizophrenia. And like our minds are precious and they're also very fragile, you know, so like I don't know what it is legally, like what would happen if you got caught with it or anything like that, but I do know from like personal use, like it messes up your head bad. And I know some people are like, oh, it opens up your thinking and this, that, and the third, but that's cap. Like it's really not like that. So
the consequence to your mind and body for trying drugs is far outweighs the consequence of the legal action that's going to be against you. I think the theme here is that you need to be accountable for yourself and your decisions and the people around you. Try to help them make good decisions, because the impact it's going to have on your body and your mind or your life is going to far out exceed probation or jail, in my opinion.
Unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. If there's any questions you've not had answered, the panelists will be available to answer those questions afterwards. Before we wrap up here today, I wanted you to know that there are a few agencies represented that can answer any questions you may have, including our panelists. They'll be set up in the Commons directly following this presentation today. Please help me in thanking our panelists and Ms. Tuggle Myers and Ms. Floyd for the presentation today.